Hello there. Welcome to episode 32 of Nevermind the Bullens, your bite-sized Everton podcast and vodcast. My name's Mike Peters. Happy New Year. Promised I'd say that again in episode 31, although it wasn't a particularly happy New Year, was it, for Everton? Keeping up with our excellent New Year's tradition of managing to just be absolutely hopeless and put on awful performances and just dreadful spectacles generally. I cast in mind back a couple of years to the game against Leicester on New Year's Day, which was without doubt one of the weirdest atmospheres I've ever been to at Goodison. It was 12:30 on New Year's Day. Everybody was still half asleep and it was a terrible game and we lost it 1-0. But at least we're consistent on New Year's Day. That's a few on the trot we've lost now. And we'll get to talk about West Ham, the West Ham game in a minute, as we pick the bones out of the gruesome corpse that was that match. But first of all, I just want to talk about Man City, obviously in the light of the game on Monday being called off, and it now subsequently transpiring that Benjamin Mendy broken protocols, COVID protocols, and he's not the first Man City player to do this. This is the problem, and the point I'm trying to make it here is that how many transgressions are there going to be from each club before the FA and the Premier League get involved? When ultimately what happens is that fixtures get called off at very short notice, and Fulham have had 2 called off this week. City have had 1. They may well have more called off. Who knows? Where's the sanctions going to come in when players players have to take individual responsibilities, and clubs can't be responsible if one person breaks protocol. You can't start fining clubs left, right and centre, but clearly there's a discipline issue within the Man City squad there as regards to them actually sticking to these protocols for the good of everybody, and it's starting to then have an impact on the league in terms of fixtures being called off and all the rest of it. So where is the point that the FA and the Premier League have to get involved and do something about it? Points deductions, fines, what have you, force them to play games even if they've only got 12 fit players. What happens? I don't know. I'm sort of thinking out loud a little bit, and I'm sure there'll be many others, far more eloquent opinion makers within the game that will be espousing on this over the next few days. But when we talk about eloquent opinion makers, Steve McManaman ain't one of them. Goodness me, what an absolute flat fool he is. I mean, I've talked about BT Sports coverage on this podcast a few times before because it's rubbish. It's consistently poor. Amazon, you have to say, have picked their game up massively this season. They had a difficult first season last season. They only had a couple of rounds of games, of course, and it was all right. It wasn't brilliant, but they've really picked it up this season. And I know Clinton Morrison got some stick for his punditry against for our game against Leicester a few weeks back. I don't think he was anywhere near as bad as people are making out. And certainly when we're seeing Karen Carney getting the abuse that she's had on Twitter, which is just unacceptable. Whether you agree with her opinions or not, you can't have official club Twitter accounts, social media accounts. I mean, if you want to push back on things, that's fine, but there's a way of doing it, and the way that Leeds did it was poor. And particularly, I thought Karen Carney, she summarised the game, the Leicester game for the radio, and I was listening to that and I thought she was very good. And this is the point, is that Clinton Morrison got some stick. I thought he'd done his research, he had opinions, he offered analysis. Karen Carney on that same game the same, but I don't see that with a lot of pundits. And I think when there's such a huge amount of coverage of the games, you're going to get some rot at times, there's no question about that. But you wonder what's going on behind the scenes. Why are these people not being produced? If we're watching games with professionals casting opinions on them, you want insight and analysis as a fan. You want them to point out things to you that you as a fan, as an ordinary common and garden football watcher, no matter how many times you go to games and stuff, you want them to pick things out that you may not have spotted, or tell you things, or offer you those little insights. They're the nuggets of information you want. And Steve McManaman seems to just act with constant surprise and incredulity about what he's watching. He doesn't offer anything other than a sense of matching my incredulity of the fact that he's been paid to proffer his opinions on football at all, irrespective of the fact that it's Everton. He just talks complete nonsense. I mean, I suppose the clue is in the name. He's there to offer analysis, and the word anal is in there, and he does talk out of his arse a lot of the time, so that may explain that. Getting on to the game, the West Ham game itself, we were well below par. There's no question. It was a dreadful game, dreadful spectacle. And I don't think either team, we certainly didn't deserve to win it. I'm not convinced West Ham did, but they got a fluky goal. You could just see it was going to be one of those games where it was going to be decided by something coming off somebody's backside or something or other, and they get a massive deflection off Yerry Mina, goes straight into the path of Souček, and he sticks it in the back of the net. Now, that's the way it is. West Ham, fair play, can't argue with the way that they came to try and play the game. I completely understand it. Set themselves up, 11 men behind the ball at times, trying to nick a goal on the break or from a set piece. They did that, and they executed an away game plan perfectly, and we couldn't break them down. Didn't pass the ball with any fluidity, any fluency. We looked leggy, we looked lacklustre, and it was a bit of a throwback to some of the games that we had earlier in the season, the Southampton, Newcastle, etc. Games where we were just way off our best, and the performance levels had sort of swung so markedly from how good we've been in the games before that, and how good we've been in the games before this, or how effective we've been in the games before this. But some of the reaction subsequently from fans on social media and all the rest of it has been somewhat overblown, in my opinion. We've got to put this in context. I know it's frustrating to lose a game that you think you should win at home, and we've dropped points at home that we shouldn't have dropped, Leeds being another example of that. But let's look at where we are, okay, and look at how far we've come in a year. And we've got to put it in that context. The thing is, this season is all over the place for every club, not just Everton. And we've got to just make sure that was just a bad day at the office, and we don't allow it to turn into 2 or 3 or 4 bad days at the office like we had after we won our opening few league games, and then went on a really poor run where we could barely buy a point and we couldn't get a clean sheet and all the rest of it. This just needs to be right. Bad day at the office. We learn from it. We iron out those mistakes, and we've lost the game by very narrow margins. Let's be honest. And we go again against Wolves, and we get a result there, and we get our performance levels back to where they need to be and have been over the last few weeks. But bottom line is we're still up in the upper echelons of the league. We've still got plenty to play for, so everybody just needs to calm down a bit. I mean, and some of the reaction to Richarlison's performance has just been absolutely crackers as well. He was rubbish on it was probably his worst game in an Everton shirt. Could nickname him Blind Alley because that's what he kept running down for the entire game. But when we've only just learned how to win a game without him, people saying, "Oh, he's not good enough. We need to get rid of him." Well, you just put your head in the sand for a bit. Just calm yourselves down, because he's an essential cog in our wheel, and we need to get more service with Dominic Calvert-Lewin, who got absolutely none against West Ham, and that's got to be. I think that's got to be essential sort of target of the January transfer window if we can get somebody else in. Because him coming to pick the ball up in our own half and stuff like that, things he was doing a couple of years ago when he was sort of making his way and he was never in the box, he was doing everything but score, he was doing huge amounts of donkey work. That's not what we want him doing now. That's for other players to do it. But it says a lot that he's not getting the service, which he should have been getting. Gylfi Sigurdsson should have been bossing that game on New Year's Day, and he didn't. Tom Davies was disappointing as well, and I've talked him up over the last few weeks. He was well off it. So, I don't blame him for coming looking for the ball, but that's because he's not getting anything from his teammates. What Sami Khedira is going to sort of bring to us, I'm not entirely sure. And I say that as a fan of Sami Khedira because, he and Mesut Ozil came through at about the same time. A bigger fan of Sami Khedira, but I'm not quite sure what buying him, when we're actually quite well covered in central midfield, is going to bring, other if he's just there to, use his experience to try and change games in the last half an hour. But the only issue we've had in central midfield is somebody to replace Allen. Now, unless it's going to be that Abdoulaye Doucouré drops into that hole, and Sami Khedira plays in Abdoulaye Doucouré's role, but I don't think he's got the legs for that anymore. He's barely played any football in the last 18 months. I'm not sure. But nonetheless, he's undoubtedly been a quality player. He's still a quality footballer. Whether he's got the legs for the Premier League at 33 remains to be seen. But we should, it sounds like he's coming in. Also sounds like Luca Dean signed a new contract, which is fantastic. Was starting to get the jitters that he was going to disappear off to other climbs, but he's so crucial to the way we play his attacking prowess, and we have missed him despite Ben Godfrey's best efforts over the last few weeks. But I can't wait to have him back, and can't wait to have him at the club for a long time. So Disappointing against West Ham, but we've got a chance to get that out of our system quite quickly against Rotherham and against Wolves over the course of the next week. I'll talk to you in episode 33 after the Rotherham game next weekend. And until then, come on, you Blues.